not turned on.
I just sent him a text waiting on you for corn, dude.
He's like, you can just wait.
Nah.
Here we go. Ready? Well, good evening, authority members. Good evening, staff. Good evening, special guests, and good evening to all the hundreds of people who are watching this meeting. I'm going to call the November 13th, 2025, Northern Virginia Transportation Authority meeting to order. Ms. Henderson, would you please take the roll?
Chair Randall,
I am here.
Vice Chair Snyder, Chairman McKay.
Yeah, we got it. Oh, he's in the.
Oh,
Okay, keep going.
Supervisor Bodie,
here.
Vice Chair DeFerrante,
In the kitchen.
Mayor Gaskins, Mayor Davis Younger,
Present.
Mayor Mensing, Mayor Reed,
Here.
Senator Boysko, Senator Delaney, or Delaney, Delegate Sewell, Mr. Gribben, Mayor Colbert,
Here. Did you hear me? I'm here.
yes,
We did,
Mr. Cutler,
Thank you.
Mr. Cutler,
Here.
Ms. Hussein.
Yeah, you.
Back there.
Here, okay. So we do not have a quorum as of yet, but everyone who we need to have in the room to make the quorum is actually in the building. And so they will be in the room shortly. We will not do any action items before we have a quorum in the room. What we will do is do some of our presentations, and then we'll wait till everybody and they're walking in the room right now, walks to the room to do any action items. That's how we do that. Now, I've already noticed that Mr. Hill and Mr. Mercer are at the table for a presentation. I thought they wanted to wait to the end of our meeting to do the presentation and just join us the entire time. But however, since they're sitting there already, I'm going to make the assumption they want to do their presentation right now. And in fact, we now have a quorum in the room with everyone who just walked in. And so, Mr. Mercer and Mr. Hill, thank you very much for being here so that we can do the presentation on DMV Moves, of which some of us in the room have been part of this effort now for, I guess, almost 2 years now, almost 2 years. And so we appreciate you being here. We know that you all are kind of taking this show on the road, doing presentations to different counties and different places. This is actually really important in that we're talking about how to find a dedicated bondable funding source for Metro. And we've been working on that for a while. So I appreciate you all being here, and I will turn it over to you. And just for the record, we do now have a voting quorum in the room.
We each have our own microphone, so we will not trespass too much on your all's time. So thank you for having us. And the first mistake there was I should say Brian Hill first, and then undercard is me, Clark Mercer from Council of Governments.
Glad you
And I do recognize. Right. Now I'm trying to move it forward here.
You know, Brian should be first all the time. That is my problem. He should always be first. You're correct. Unless Mr. Hempstead's in the room.
Yeah, they go there.
I don't think he believes that.
As we're figuring out moving it forward, and I probably busted it, so I apologize. I think at this point in the year, we're all PowerPointed out, so we will, Brian and I briefly talk about the process of DMV Moves and the recommendations, which I know folks want to talk about. But it's 18-month process. There's a task force that's composed of elected officials from the COG board and also WMATA board members. They met several times over the last 18 months in 2 work groups. Brian led one of them. Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the group that you led?
Yes, and thank you, Clark, for also working with us. The task group I worked with was government partners. We looked at how to fund. That's good.
Hold on just 1 second. I think we have to So just hold on. We have technical problems. And then when you come back on, let me know so I can say we did nothing in the.
Did I hear that?
You did. Just walking in the room, man.
Discussion. For the advertisement said, you don't have to broadcast it.
For being unsure, I'd rather be safe, just in case, unless we're back broadcasting again. Yeah, we had a small glitch and we stopped recording. We did not do any business while we were not recording. We're going to restart and give it back to Mr. Hill.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
Mr.
you,
Mercer,
Chair
there we go.
Randall. Again, we had an opportunity to have the 23 CAOs and or jurisdictions in the COG region talk about how we could fund WMATA, in particular the metro portion of WMATA, as well as looking at the bus routes as well. The first meeting, I believe, General Manager Clark basically stated that he needed $1 billion. And many of the CAOs, including of myself, kind of sat back and said, all right, that's a good first take. So we spent approximately 18 months understanding the metro budget. From top to bottom, we took tours, and there's some component pieces within metro that if I showed you, and I've showed the chairman their component pieces that runs our rail system, you would be surprised. So I didn't take the 1 billion as the number, but I did know that we would need to facilitate some changes for best operations, for world-class service. And I heard and listened to all of the things that Metro stated. The question was how much could the region absorb and how much I could actually sit with my chairman and say, all right, this is going to be the Virginia share, of which you're about 46%, of which that's almost 2 pennies. That was not an easy conversation to have with my chairman, nor was it an easy conversation. I assume that many of the CAOs had in Northern Virginia with their respective bodies. But I do believe at this juncture, the $460 million ask is about right. Now, we could ask for more and get some other things done, like automated trains to go quicker or sooner. But I think it has to be a process where we do things at a collective pace to ensure that we get what we wanted, and we will have metrics and benchmarks associated with these changes. If Mr. Clark understands that we're looking at him to provide us with details as we move forward. And when those details don't come forward the way we need them to, we can probably either slow it down, do a report out. But I will say that the process was a long process. It was a good process. I'm thankful to COGS for leading the efforts with WMATA. I'm also thankful for NVTA and NVTS for being there. Monica, thank you. Kate, I think she's in the room. Thank you for being there as well and showcasing your input. The input was a lot of different people. It wasn't just the CAOs. It wasn't COG. It wasn't Metro trying to tell us everything that they needed, which they did try to do. But it was a process that included everybody, and I think we're in a better place. It is also a process that also showcases that, you know, VRE and Mark could have a collaboration. And I basically said we weren't tasked with dealing with that. But with Longbridge coming on board, tying in Prince William County, I stated to Randy, and I've stated to the folks in Maryland, it would be nice for us to take a Mark train all the way down to anywhere in Virginia and vice versa, having the VRE go all the way to Camden Yards. We have the
Mr.
capacity
Hill,
to do
just
that.
for the record, for people that may not know, Randy would be Randy Clark, who is the CEO
Yes, ma'am.
of Metro.
I
Yes.
thought I mentioned his name first time. But no, yes, Randy Clark, Executive Director, the General Manager of Metro. Sorry. Thank you for the clarification. But again, it's about us trying to be a regional partner with Maryland, the district, and the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Couple quick highlights, and then obviously take any questions. But the CAOs and the government partners work group, there was a community partners work group as well. every chamber type group, Greater Washington Partnership, the Board of Trade, your labor unions, your environmental groups, your passenger advocates. And the goal at the beginning of this was not to see how many people we could fit around the table, although it felt like that at times, but we didn't want anyone to raise their hand at the end of the process and say, I wasn't included. Hope to find consensus for everybody, but we didn't want anyone to say we weren't involved in the process. And Brian and his team did do a good job of not only with Metro, but working with our other transit providers in the region and really drilling down on the numbers. And with Metro, having them demonstrate an amount of money that could come in to maintain a state of good repair and to show us that bonds could be issued and paid off, and then a revolving bonded again, put out to market in a way that we're not back here in 5 years with the DMV Moves Part 2. And that 460 million is what was come up with for a manageable state of good repair. So just like any Department of Transportation, they manage a healthy maintenance backlog. They don't get it to zero, but 460 is the number. The Virginia share of that is 136 million, growing at 3% a year. Now, the 3% a year is important to note in 2018, and we have folks around the table who were leaders in securing new funding. Two things about the funding from 2018. One, it was flat, and two, we learned a lesson, and it was echoed many times. We cannot redirect money that comes to NVTA to plug this existing need moving forward. And that was made clear. And certainly there's a new set of players in Richmond, delegates and senators, folks that advocated for that are no longer in Richmond, but it was underscored that that's not a solution here. We partnered with SJ28 closely, and a lot of our data, all of our data was shared. So initially, early on, we found additional $70 million need from the other transit partners, Art and Loudon and Connector and Dash. SJ28 did great work, refined that number, I believe 55 million a year. Kate, that's correct. And we both came up with the same number for VRE, which is 35 million a year. The task force was really clear in multiple times that they came together. We talked about whether or not there should be one regional tax to solve this across the river for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And the clear consensus was, look, we can find a number that we can all agree to, but then we need to go back to our respective states and jurisdictions and figure out how we're going to solve for that. The policy goal in wanting to either get one tax or states figure out their own taxes is to make sure it's predictable and to make sure it's bondable for Metro. And oftentimes the states in Annapolis and in Richmond, DC will add all sorts of requirements to their share of the funding for Metro. And as you start putting more ornaments on the Christmas tree and more hands touch a tax dollar, it becomes less bondable and less predictable. So that solved, that 136 is just on the capital side. And Brian mentioned automation. So one of the biggest pieces of that deferred maintenance, Metro right now spends in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year patching their signaling and communication systems across the system. And they will continue to spend that money. They would like to divert that money and upgrade their signaling. And you can take Secretary Duffy's comments about FAA and their communication signaling equipment and just replace that with Metro. It's the same type of situation. And what will be really important for Metro, when we talk about a local match, we talk about the states all putting money into a pool and being able to seek federal funding. And with predictable, bondable capital money, Metro can go seek up to a 50% match by the federal government for that signaling modernization package. And you kind of get 2/3 of the way replacing your signaling, you can go to full modernization, which is you can go to Dulles and doors open and close, and you go from one section of the airport to the other. The trains are a lot safer, they're a lot more reliable, they're quicker, and you can move more of them. And we'll finish up here. We talked a lot, and this is where Monica and DTA are leaders in this space, talking about bus rapid transit. There's a lot of discussion of bus corridors through DMV Moves. And I think a global recognition that yes, if a bus leaves Vienna and goes into surrounding jurisdiction into DC, and that route has a lot of folks that they're carrying, we want that bus to be able to move, and we don't want to sit in traffic all day. And we want the jurisdictions to work together to figure out how best to move that bus from point A to point B. That sounds pretty simple. And then when you start really looking at who owns the roads and the jurisdictions and who's going to operate the buses, it gets a lot more complicated really quickly. And so at the beginning, of the process, there was a recommendation to put a regional, money into a regional fund on bus corridors. And that's got the attention of folks in this room and across the river. Okay, what are the details? And is a tax dollar from my jurisdiction going to go treat a bus route in another jurisdiction? I don't think we're there yet in terms of making that commitment, but we are committed to identifying routes, working with the BRT plan that NVPA has been working hard on, and coming up with a handful of these corridors and committing to report back to COG what we're doing to effectuate a better movement in those corridors. Not going to go through all of this. These recommendations have been made a number of times over the last 30 years. You know, one number to call if there's an issue with a bus, the backbone of bus routes, making sure they have the same coding so that you can go on one app and see if a bus is actually arriving and, you know, from Metro or from, you know, the connector. How do we treat kids in this region? Do they ride free? Will they ride free in this jurisdiction? You got to show your student ID here. So kids riding free across the region, accepting transfers in a way that makes sense. And so all of these, I'd say that the last two are ones where we need a bit more work, particularly the last one, kind of how we train the workforce of the future in transit so you can, you know, move between jurisdictions. On shared resources, we brought all the procurement folks together and they really nerded out on like all the things to buy. And I don't think, you know, obviously the biggest, most expensive thing is buses. And that's probably going to be the hardest thing to get to quickly. But I mean, we got granular to the point where folks were talking about the soap that they use to wash buses. And they were like, oh, you use the same soap that we could procure this together and save money and tires and things like that. So COG is in the process of setting up one database of all the transit contracts so folks can look at and ride off of and do joint procurement. I think baby steps there, starting with things like bus soap might one day lead to us all riding off the same bus contract. But for all of these, the question that Brian and I both asked our staffs was, if we made this recommendation 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and it was such a good idea, how come it's not done yet? And so in the report that will be talked about at the final meeting on Monday, all of these recommendations have a feedback loop, and holding COG and the Transportation Planning Board and working closely with my deputy copy accountable to making sure we work with the jurisdictions moving forward. If you think about some of the reports, like the LaHood report's a really good example of one that came out. Big name came in, made very broad recommendations, and the task force dissolves and you don't hear from folks again. Everyone kind of looks around a table and they say, what do they mean by bus corridors or joint procurement or, you know, better signage, and who's responsible for that? And we all go on with our lives and don't actually execute. So Metro's on the hook to execute a number of these recommendations. And then all of your local providers have been fantastic to work with Monica and the like to say, we're here and we're going to help execute on these recommendations, and then, you know, hold COG and Metro accountable if they're making them back in 6 months or a year, and that's where we are on these 6. Ryan, what I probably missed a bunch.
No, I think you did a great job. I mean, it was a exhaustive process, and I believe all the bus operators throughout our jurisdictions worked very well together. We didn't always agree, but we got to a place where we believe we can put something forward, and it's now in front of our governing bodies to move forward. And as I stated, I've been speaking to my chairman on this topic for 18 long months, and he's given me some great wisdom and insight about his thoughts. But again, there's 23 other jurisdictions that were a party to our conversation. And we're in a place now where we can go forward. And I thank you.
Yeah, and a couple quick things then with it. And this was on a previous slide, but it's worth bears repeating. This new capital funding, without new capital funding for Metro, they'll be paying debt service by 29, and they're not going to be invested in state aid repair. So we'll return.
It's actually 28.
28, right? Okay.
And the ops is going to be in 29.
Yep, gotcha. So that's number one. Number two, the states, obviously, folks say, is this the right time? You got to kind of put a plan out and then work a plan, and recognizing that DC, Maryland, Virginia will act on this when they are ready to. And the third piece, you know, this 3% growth a year. And I always say this when we're at these meetings, there's two sides to that coin. And if you asked in 18, DC, Maryland, and Virginia what were the expectations for that new money? What were we getting out of it? And then what were the cost controls? You would get three very different answers from DC, Maryland, and so we need to memorialize in legislation or through some type of MOU. This is what we're expecting to get out of this new money based on WMATA's ridership growth estimates.
Right.
And then also, that's an amount that's going to be a challenge, but one I think we can rise to fund. But then what does that mean in terms of Metro year-over-year growth cap? And what does that 3% mean? And I really think we should all hone in on that, because if you ask an 18 what the 3% growth cap meant, you would get one answer from Virginia, one from the district, and one from Maryland. And you can't control year-over-year growth if the three folks paying the bill don't agree on what the cap is. Correct.
I'm going to ask, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this presentation, but for all the work you've both done over the past 18 months. It has been a heavy lift and so important to do. I'm going to ask a couple of questions first, just for the record. Mr. McKay and I both sit on DMV Moves, so I do know these answers, but I do think I want some questions asked and answered for the record, and then we'll go to other questions if anybody else has them. First question, you did say what Virginia's share was. Could you also tell us what Maryland and DC share was? That's the first thing. Really important is that DC, Maryland, and Virginia, especially Virginia, is different, has a different funding mechanism to fund Metro. Can you talk about that? Because that difference is really important, just in general. And then finally, and please know, I completely agree with this 1,000%, but just for the record, why were we focused on capital and not operating?
Yes,
Why don't you find the
there you go. You knock it out.
second question? I believe you said, you asked what is the mechanism for that? In the Commonwealth of Virginia, 46% of the total is paid by the localities. So, when I say localities, I'm speaking of Loudoun County, who now has Metro stops, this city of Alexandria, Arlington County, Fairfax County. I don't believe I'm missing anybody there. We pay a portion of the total that is augmented by the state or the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
The District of Columbia, who has agreed to this number, Kevin Donahue and I have sat on this committee for 18 months. They have their one funding source, and it's up to Kevin and the Mayor Bowser to figure out how they come up, and Clark's going to give you the number when we find it. And then the state of Maryland, which was interesting to me, all of their funding comes from the state.
Yeah.
It does not come from Prince George's. It does not come from Montgomery, because their structure and financial structure is so different than the Commonwealth. So as Mr. Clark, General Manager of Metro, stated, we have a model that's he considered Frankenstein. I thought it was a model of sustainability, because we knew what we were supposed to do in Fairfax, Loudoun, Alexandria, and Arlington, coupled with what the Commonwealth was providing us, and we just assumed that the District of Columbia, as well as the state of Maryland, knew what they were doing, which they supposedly we all think they do. So when we have a number in the Commonwealth and it's $10, well, 46% of it's being paid by the folks sitting in this room. That was simple cut for me. But now the question on the state dollars is a lot of it cannot be bonded. So this is why we're taking out the capital side to ensure that Metro can move forward. People don't really understand that the state dollars, for the most part, cannot be bonded unless it's under a certain mechanism. So that's question number 2. I'm sorry, what was question number 3? What was question number 3?
Well, you kind of just answered the question number 2 and 3, to be quite honest, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, so for out of the 3, according to the formula, so Virginia's share would be 136, Maryland's 152, and DC's 173. That's based on the current funding formula, which is always discussed whenever the numbers come up. And Brian pointed out, especially in Maryland, how they handle all their transit funding goes to Annapolis and is paid out of state tax dollars. We looked at operating and capital, and we started this out just like Brian articulated, a much higher capital number for the solve. There was a number to solve for operating, and kind of due to sound financial management, Metro coming up with savings, increased ridership, 80% plus fare evasion decrease. Metro at the end of 18 months, so we will continue operating Metro with the operating budget we have, and we don't need to solve for that. We have solved for it. So that was certainly good news.
Yeah, and like I said, it was an exhaustive process and trying to understand all of Metro's numbers. That took some time, but we got to that place, and I think we're in a better place today.
Thank you. Thank you. That's why I wanted those questions on the record. Questions from anybody else? Mr. DeFronte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for all the work. See if I can do mine. Here, Randall. I too was on DMV Moves with you because I like to remind you each time. I might have been late to the dance, but I was there. So
You were, sir.
So the number and the work was outstanding, and I want to credit both chairs as well as you guys for a lot of work to really drive the thinking to the number, down to the 136. One of the slides talks about our local pieces, which we care about. I am not aware yet of the thorough process that we did for Metro that would have applied to the other, to the rail, VRE, plus the others. Of course, we support DART. But it seems to me that the governor-elect is going to have a lot of questions about money for JLARC and everything else. And so I just want to raise that. I want to fund those, but I also, if we had stayed where the original Metro ask was, that would be a different world. And so can you talk just a little bit about whether there's that process? You and Richmond are going to get to figure it all out, but I at least would want to know that there's some testing on those other numbers, because going from 136 to 400 is a big jump.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, kind of, but when we did a data call early on, some of the local transit providers don't necessarily look out as far as Metro does for their capital program. So they had a number, and NBTC and SJ28 did a great job further refining those numbers and refining them downwards. Right. I suspect as we go through the process, everyone's going to want to kick the tires a bit on all these numbers and make sure that they're accurate and sustainable. But I will say between our work initially and then SJ28 really taking a look under the hood and looking at those numbers. But some of the local providers just don't have as robust capital outlay teams as Metro does, and recognize that. So it got them thinking, okay, where are we going to be in 5 years, 10, 15, 20? Metro probably is forced just to the size of their operation to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you. And I wasn't saying that it's not done. I got to see all the other pieces, and I don't know that we got to see the local component and thinking about, Falls Church, Alexandria, Arlington, and there's the rail piece. We have, it's hugely benefits, but it's a different thing a little bit than parts of Prince William and Fairfax, et cetera. So
Absolutely.
And somebody hand Mayor Gaskins a microphone, please.
Thank you.
Sure.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, I turned it off.
You're on.
Okay, there we go. Thank you both for the presentation. I was just wondering, you talked about how there will be very specific mechanisms and feedback loops in order to hold Metro accountable. Can you just provide one or two examples of what that looks like in practice or what you're proposing?
I'll say this, as I work through the budget process in Fairfax County, when the bills due, and we state that we're going to do these 10 things this year, I'm looking to see if they actually get those 10 things done. When we do the final report, we're going to continue working towards streamlining what we will want to see from Metro. My goal and Clark's goal and the group's goal was that $1 billion number. There was no way I was going to come in this room and say it's $1 billion. So now we've got it to a number that I think is somewhat manageable. With that, every year they're supposed to do something to deal with that $460 million worth of capital. And if they don't get it done, it's going to be reported out. We're going to have them set up a system of this is what we're going to do: step A, step B, step C, year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. And when those things don't happen, there's going to be a lot of groups that are going to hear that they're not happening.
A couple things. I think the biggest accountability issue is making sure Virginia, Maryland, and DC are in the same sheet of music with what year-over-year growth is. And they talk about exceptions to the 3% cap. And one state said 3% year-over-year growth is 3% year-over-year growth needs to be held at 3%. One state said, okay, but there's a couple dozen exceptions. And then one state says there is no cap. So that is like the biggest accountability measure. We will be kind of doing a roadshow and going to different councils and going through these recommendations more granularly and saying, okay, for Alexandria, we're going to have one sign, one number, one stop. This is what it means for Alexandria City Council and action that you need to take, working with Dash. And for this recommendation, Metro has the lead and needs to do X, Y, and Z for transit. So we need to, on each of the recommendations, we'll have kind of who's assigned in the region. And then we're recommending to the Transportation Planning Board that they issue an annual report on where everyone is on those recommendations.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for all the work that went into DMV Moves and especially the people sitting around this table. Thank you so very much. Question I have is that after all this capital expenditure, what is Metro doing to deal with the fundamental flaw with the original system of one track in each direction and the congestion that occurs in the Roslyn Tunnel? In other words, what can we in Northern Virginia expect that this capital expenditure will help do to relieve the congestion? We're not, I saw specifically off the table is an additional tunnel, or because that would be probably many billions of dollars, which is reasonable. But what can we expect in terms of better service, and what is it about your plan that will sort of deal with the fact that there's one track in each direction?
So a couple things. I mean, DMV Moves did not do everything for everybody, right? So the formula comes up at task force meetings. The assignment was not to revisit the funding. That's a Metro board decision. I don't know at what point in the future there needs to be a new tunnel under Roslyn. I do know that if Metro goes to full modernization, they'll be the only transit system in the lower 48 states that's modernized, automated. Now, most every major metro system in the world that's new is being automated. Between that and bus rapid transit from Roslyn to the newly built RFK, will at least a few decades from having to revisit that decision on Roslyn. I don't know if it'll put it off forever, but it will certainly help at a much lower cost than putting a tunnel in there. So that's, you know, and the other piece about this wasn't just a Metro look. I mean, we had a passenger rail summit at Union Station a couple weeks ago, and the Commonwealth's putting billions of dollars into rebuilding Long Bridge. Governor Youngkin's administration acquiring the right of way for the Manassas line, or the administration purchasing that right of way. The money is being spent right now. The planning has to happen now with VRE and MARC to ensure that VRE and MARC trains can cross the river. If that planning doesn't happen and that work gets done and that bridge is rebuilt and we don't have trains crossing over the river, that will be a major miss. The other piece is we sometimes will hear from some members in the region encouraging Metro to extend into other jurisdictions. And I would just offer that when you look at the numbers for other peer metro areas and other much smaller metro areas, the passenger or ridership is higher. So there's a lot of room for VRE and MARC to grow. And there is going to be 3 lanes, 3 tracks with the rebuilding of Long Bridge and the acquisition of that right of way to get a lot more VRE trains moving, more of them on time, more of them going into Union Station, going down to Richmond. And that's probably the biggest opportunity that we have. So I mean, I think if you think about extending Metro versus really leaning in and making sure VRE has the support it needs, there's a lot of room for VRE to grow.
Supervisor Brody.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's on, there we go. Thank you. Wanted to thank the 2 chairs and everyone that at the table that put their work into this. I wasn't at
And
DMV
Mr.
Moves.
DeFerrante.
And the mayor and the chair. And Well, I wasn't there. I'm a nerd, so obviously I've been following it, been asking at meetings, and sometimes when I ask about DMV moves or SA 28, the other people in the room, their eyes closed because they don't really know what's going on. But I do, and I really appreciate all the work that you've done. I think this is the closest our region's ever been, frankly, between both initiatives. Actually have something tangible. And we can go back to the general, so we can go back to our locality, we can go back to other regional bodies and say, hey, look, we have an end goal in mind and we actually have tangible numbers and frankly, mechanisms that we're going to be applying for and that we already have in some cases to actually start the ball down the road to get there. And so I also appreciate the Mayor Gaskin's question about accountability. I guess on the flip side of that is knowing how, I hate to say it this way, how volatile the economic state of the region has been over the past few years, whether it's the pandemic 4 years ago, or frankly the shutdown and the uncertainty with the administration's actions this year. What has been put in the last 18 months in making some of these plans sort of resilient and economic shock proof? Because obviously it's a high order to ask for localities and the states and the district to pay a certain amount of money. And to your point, Mr. Mercer, put in that 3% over time, knowing that there are so many forces outside our control in terms of the economy. And how has that been visioned and planned out?
A couple things. I mean, it takes time to accomplish things in Richmond and Annapolis, and you got to apply time and pressure. So having the facts and the data to bring forth is important. The 3% growth, look, there was a report out this week about the Commonwealth's growth year over year. I think it was 15% maybe last year, 13% the year before. If you look at other organizations that are heavy on personnel and heavy on laying asphalt or using steel to build things and ask them to hold their growth 3% year over year, you wouldn't find any that have. So, I mean, I think there's not an organization that from 2018 to 2025 pays less for personnel or things that are products. And so I think holding Metro has been held accountable for a few years to a growth rate that some of their counterparts have not held. That's the fact. How do you talk about that in Richmond and sell the rest of the state? But leave that up to the senator and delegate. Obviously, there's other parts of the state that have asks and needs, and when you can do something that helps everybody out, I mean, we leave that up to the folks that do that for a living to figure out. And obviously from an economic development standpoint, and this region remaining competitive, I mean, we were just ranked the #1 area for congestion in the country. And I'm doing a presentation to the House Appropriations Committee next week on the regional economy. And we're having a moment where we need to double down on making sure this is an attractive place to invest. So that's where I would pivot if I was in Richmond talking about, and obviously this Fairfax County alone is 25% of the state's GDP, and the footprint NVTA covers is almost half of the state's GDP. So this is not a time to not invest in what helps attract and grow business.
And internally, I know that your county executive is probably thinking the way I've been thinking. I've been prepping my chairman for the last 2.5 years for this day. And now the question is, he's got 2 or 3 options, which options he's going to want to push forward, and we're going to articulate that to our board. And that's next steps. And I'm hoping he's going to pick option 1.
Appreciate the last thing I'll say. I thank you for that. And you're right. And as someone who represents the district that has the most congested highway corridor in the country, the 160 exit everyone knows about, I appreciate that, because Mr. Mercer, you hit the nail on the head. To go back to it, at the end of the day, we are doing all this to improve the quality of lives for the residents in this region. The only way we can do that is by really expanding the field, investing, and getting so many more multimodal options out there that people, their option isn't only to jump in their car or jump on one bus. It's a whole multitude and menu of options. So I also wanted to appreciate how broad you all cast the net. And it wasn't just focused on the metro core, it was focused on those other parts of the region, which I agree 100% with that last piece that you said as well, which is, hey, we have to really lean into BRT. We need to lean into BRE. Would love to have more conversations about bringing BRT through the plan that the authority approved a few months ago, to really start bringing that farther down in Prince William County so we can avail ourselves of that regional connectivity as well.
Well, that's absolutely the goal.
Mr. Hill, a little while ago, when you were speaking, you called your chairman wise. You want to stick with that before I call him?
My evaluation's next.
Chairman Kay.
He is clearly wise too. No, and in all seriousness, I want to start, first of all, before I share a couple of comments on the piece about the heavy lift that's going to have to occur in Richmond. I would just say, we talked about, Clark, you said, there are other needs in the state, and that is without a doubt, but let us not ignore the couple of years old now NVTC analysis that said there's also $1.5 billion flowing to the Commonwealth of Virginia because of the existence of our rail and transit operations in Northern Virginia. And so we are paying the state every year a lot of money because of the existence of transit. So let's make sure we understand that as a starting point, to the tune of 1.5 billion, which is probably higher now than when that analysis was done. And so I say that because I hope Virginia can be a leader on this. I think the time is right. I think the time is right politically. I think the time is right fiscally. I think the time is right because we've been handed a roadmap here that is doable. And when we first sat down at DMV Moves, I was concerned we were going to end up with something that was not doable. And this is doable. The numbers have come way down because of the work of these two gentlemen and certainly the work of Randy Clark at Metro. But this is important to drive those costs down. The accountability measures that are in here, the oversight measures that are in here are major steps forward for us in the governance of Metro. And so those are tools that have never been at our disposal before. This is probably the most studied transit system in the world at this point. We need to be done studying and analyzing and get to the point of actually doing something about this. And that's why, I believe the time is right. On the issue of the funding formula that was raised earlier, and the members of the task force can confirm this, but there's no agreement on the funding formula other than there's nothing being done with the funding formula at this point. As it was mentioned, that's for others to do. Yeah. I think if you ask people from DC, Maryland, and Virginia, none of us like the funding formula. We'd all like to see it be done differently, but the reality is that was way outside of the scope of what this task force was trying to achieve. And I do want to make a comment on the bus piece because it is true there was a lot of discussion about this and there was also a lot of concern. There's no concern about trying to find efficiencies, trying to look at branding opportunities, trying to look at new technology to make the customer experience better. But there was a big disagreement about Metro taking over local bus systems. And the reason why that is so important has nothing to do with the cost drivers and the other things that were mentioned here, and has everything to do with the local governments who run and fund those systems need to be able to control them. I do not want to go, and I served on the Metro board for 4 years. I do not want to go to the Metro board to get permission to change one route of the Fairfax connector to get around a major infrastructure improvement project that's happening that's delaying the timing of the route, or to reroute a bus for a new development that's added 1,000 new residents and now has demand, to a Metro board of people, many of which who have no understanding of the granular issues that we deal with on the road every day in our jurisdictions. And so maintaining the oversight of those bus systems allows them to be spry, allows them to respond to actual things that are happening in our community. And the process for getting those types of things changed, with no disrespect to Metro, but the process is long and arduous to be able to do that. And it requires people who have no concept of our buses to be making those decisions. So maintaining that autonomy, that operating autonomy, was a really important thing to me, and I think to others who participated. I do want to ask one question. And that is with regard to SJ28, because we have focused and DMV focused exclusively on capital, as we know. But I believe SJ28 is also has opened the door to looking at operating assistance as well. And so while we are, major funders of operating, there still is a pretty heavy potential ask of the Commonwealth of Virginia to increase operating assistance for Metro in the years ahead. And so DC and Maryland do that. I think it would be a mistake for us to entirely let the Commonwealth off the hook on further conversations on that. So can you tell us at all, I know it's outside of the scope of what you all have been managing, but how does this align with SJ 28 on the operating side, knowing that we have been focused on the capital?
But partially answer, but I'll ask Kate to maybe, Kate, why don't you come on? Is it all right if Kate comes on up here?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Miss.
You know, when the rebaselining occurred for Metro's budget last year, and that, to back up a little bit, when COVID occurred and Metro stopped billing the states.
Right.
When they picked their billing back up a few years later, they could only pick it back up based on a 3% increase of where they were 3 or 4 years previous. So there was a gap there that if they had just kept billing at 3%, they would have been at this level. They rebaselined last year. And the way the Commonwealth paid for that was out of general fund dollars. And that's not the way the Commonwealth likes to pay for its transportation bills.
Right.
So still need a fix in Richmond on that. What I was representing is that there's above and beyond that rebaselining. There's not a new operating ask for Metro moving forward, but the Commonwealth still has work to do figuring that out in Richmond, how that bill will be paid.
Okay, Heise, did you want to add anything?
No, I really appreciate the comments indeed. So SJ 28, and we do have Senator Boysko here was on SJ 28 as well, did specifically look at the operating gap that DC and Maryland have already committed to. And that's part of the reason it wasn't a conversation at DMV Moves, is there were already long-term commitments made for that additional funding for the operating assistance to WMATA. So SJ 28 did take that as a part of their funding package. So $153 million, and that's in FY 27. So that actually is an immediate need. The capital reflecting again the $135 million that DMV Moves identified was identified as sort of 1 year later. But in terms of what's happening right now, the need for the operating assistance is an immediate ask. And then the capital, again, actually I should say for WMATA as well as for our local bus systems, for OmniRide, for VRE, et cetera, would be something that could be phased in if needed be.
And I appreciate it. I mean, I asked that question on purpose because as we are preparing our legislative packages as jurisdictions, we need to be mindful here, not only of, trying to accomplish the goals of DMV Moves, but also that remaining operating piece that is so important to the transit services, particularly of Metro up here. And so I just wanted to make sure people didn't walk out of here thinking, hey, we got no issues on the operating side. We're only focused on capital because that's the only place where we have issues. It's not the only place that we have issues. And then finally, I think we're gonna, and I mentioned the legislative package because I think we as an organization are going to have to spend considerable time working with our delegation, most importantly, our delegation members who are on the authority about appropriate strategies and things to be able to do to be helpful. Mm-hmm. Because I still think there's a lot of misunderstanding across the Commonwealth about what the value of Metro is to the state. We know what it is to our region, but to the state. And I think we're going to need some help trying to navigate that in the appropriate way. But also making sure that we are trying to be as helpful as we can be to the folks in Richmond who are going to have the heavy lift of trying to help make sure that this whole effort materializes into something meaningful and that we have a chance in Virginia here to lead it.
And we still want our $38 million back.
38 and a half.
38 and a half. Senator Boysko.
Forget that.
Forget the app. Don't forget the app.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to congratulate you all who participated on DMV Moves for the really comprehensive work that you did, not only in setting what the problem was, but in looking at ways of solving it with some really tangible solutions. And as a member of the SJ 28 study as well, that's what we did, was we not only looked at what we have to accomplish, but then looked at an array of ways that in the legislature we can address those with a variety of different tax schemes and concepts. Chairman McKay just said exactly what I was getting ready to say, which is not everybody in the Commonwealth who is in the General Assembly has a deep appreciation for the relevance and the economic impact that Metro and our transit systems have in Virginia. And it will be incumbent upon all of the all of the jurisdictions here at this table, as well as the business community, will need to communicate that repeatedly, because we will have a huge lift in a variety of areas, from healthcare to education to some of the things that we're losing at the federal level, as well as this transportation package that we expect we will have. And again, I would like to thank you all for being very clear, setting parameters, making sure that there's accountability standards, giving us specific taxing concepts in front that we will have in front of us, so that the people who are going to be at the table making those decisions will have some ownership and some ability to make decisions based on what's going to be best, not only for Northern Virginia, but for the Commonwealth overall. And so congratulations and thank you for your due diligence, because I know that this has been really difficult, and I'm optimistic that we will get what we have to get done this year to deal with the operational piece that we have pledged that we are going to do. And Ms. Matthijs, you really did a great job helping us get that done. And just want to thank this body for all that you do to help communicate what needs to be communicated about the importance of our transportation system. And that goes for all the staff as well.
So I will wrap it up with some final thoughts. One, I'm going to slightly disagree with Senator Boysko and my good friend, Chair McKay. I think there's a very big difference between not understanding and not wanting to understand. I think people in the General Assembly very well understand. But if you don't want to do anything different, it's easy not to want to understand. And I think we shouldn't. I think to some degree, it's disingenuous to say that people don't understand. Is also why I'm so appreciative of our General Assembly members on this body. I will say, I think for the first time, we have 3 General Assembly members who go down to Richmond and protect us and talk about the things that need to be talked about, and will sit down and say, tell me what you don't understand, let me help you. So I very much appreciate the 3 of you, because I think it is actually not a very hard concept to understand, and they're pretty smart people down there. So that's first thing. Secondly, I'm going to slightly disagree with Mr. McKay in that when we get to the time where we're talking about buses, I do think there may be a discussion I want to have, if I'm the person still here, about, for lack of a better way of saying it, a spine of the bus system being a combined system. It doesn't have to be the bus system in total, but a spine of the bus system being a combined system. A discussion I will want to look at. Now, who knows if we do that, where we end up or where we might not end up? Who knows? System the wrong way. But at least to have the discussion, I think, would be really, really helpful. And so I will encourage that. I do think, it can't be a discussion as it goes into each neighborhood and every stop. But when I think of how hard it is to go from Loudoun County to Arlington, and how many people are just like, I'm just not going to do it. Right? I mean, I'm not going to figure out 3 different routes, 3 different pay schedules. It's impossible. So I want to have that discussion when it is time. And finally, I will say this: the man sitting to the right of me, Mr. Snyder, and I have, from the time I stepped into a COG meeting, we have talked about the fact that the federal government needs to be paying more into Metro. And every time I say it, what I'm told is that's never going to happen. We're not going to have that conversation. That means I'm going to stop saying it. I'm never going to stop saying this. I don't believe we have held their feet to the fire enough. And I think because we say it's not going to happen, we don't even ask. And you do not ask, you do not get what you do not ask for. And it is unfathomable to me that the system that moves this federal government workforce is paying so little into this system. And it doesn't matter to me who's in the majority, who's in the minority, who's the president. This does not matter. We should be putting together a concerted effort to ask the federal government to pay more into Metro. And I will say that, I said that then, I say this now, and I will say this to the very end. So that is all. Thank you all. Unless you have any closing comments, you're good?
I just wanted to make sure you knew that Mr. Hemstreet and I are talking about that spine as we speak. And once we connect Loudon and Fairfax in another way, we're going to start working towards Alexandria and Arlington. That's part of the CAO discussion, but I know we've been dismissed, so thank you.
You can stay. You can. You can stay. Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you, Mr. Mattias. Appreciate you. All right, authority members, we're going to move on to the next presentation we have, which is the Transform 66 outside the Beltway concessionaire fee project status update. I may have to leave a little bit earlier tonight. I got word earlier today that my sister was rushed to the hospital. She has to have her gallbladder out. They have visiting hours until 10 o'clock. And so I'm going to try to make it up there before visiting hours. If I have to leave in about an hour, I could try to get to the hospital, I'm going to do that. Otherwise, my mother's going to keep calling me and asking me about my sister. That's a phone call. If I do have to leave, I'll let you all know, but we're going to try to get through as much as we can. And right now, go to item number 4.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Shropshire from the Northern Virginia District, Department of Transportation. I represent the mega projects team. I'm happy to be here this evening to give the annual update on the concession fee projects relative to the 66 outside the Beltway project. Just as a quick reminder to everyone, our project from 66 outside the Beltway, our concession partner, 66 Mobility Express Partners, committed $500 million as part of that project, a concession fee payment. And this concession fee has been and continues to be used to advance a number of transportation improvement projects that we'll go through tonight quickly. These projects were recommended by this board and they were approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board several years ago. You'll see tonight's update. But this really is a tangible example of how Virginia's public-private partnership program really is advancing transportation projects that are multimodal in nature that otherwise probably wouldn't have funding available. And we're really a national leader in those. And so we'll get right to it. If I can get this to advance, maybe. Oh no, maybe I'm. Okay, very good. Thanks for the help. So just as a reminder, what the requirements for these projects are, they have to benefit the facility users. And so this would be the users of the 66 corridor, and that's a code requirement. The projects have to be federally eligible. They have to meet one of the project goals that you see listed there on the slide: move more people, enhance transportation connectivity, reduce congestion on the roadway, increase travel options. They have to be selected and recommended by the NVTA, and then they have to be approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. On our next slide, you'll see the different categories. We have different projects that fit into different categories. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but on this slide and the next one, we get to it. We'll see the projects. We have a brief status of each one that you can look through in your packet. Again, these were added to the plan back in 2017, so a number of the projects have been completed. Some are still underway. We have projects that were constructed along the project corridor, the 22.5-mile corridor. We have transit projects that are listed here on this slide that have various stages of completion. One of the ones you notice there is the BRE Manassas line upgrade that has 4 distinct project components. So we've listed those and kind of what the status of those are. On the next slide, we have the projects that are pedestrian related. Again, some are under construction, some have been completed. And we also have the roadway projects listed there as well. Many of those have been completed as well as they have been under construction for a number of years. On our next slide, this might be maybe more of interest for our conversation this evening. This lists the project. It lists the organization that is administering the project, whether that is VDOT or one of our locality partners. It also lists the amount of money that's been approved to date for those concession fees. And when I say to date, we have used the snapshot at the end of our fiscal year at VDOT. So that was through the end of June 2025. And then on the column on the far right-hand side of the slide, you'll see a potential shortfall or surplus that's been identified to date on the project. I would note that this shortfall or surplus is the same snapshot in time. So that was the end of the fiscal year for VDOT. This really reflects projects that have been completed their construction phase, but many of those are probably still awaiting the financial end of, or the financial aspects of the project to be completed. For instance, we might not have received all of the invoices for the project yet, final billing. We still might have some outstanding right-of-way issues to resolve on the project. So the final project budget will be reconciled once all of that information is received, and then the project reaches what we call financial closure. So for example, on this slide, you'll see the Falls Ford Road project. It is showing a just around a $2.9 million surplus right now. That project was substantially completed earlier this year, the construction. But there is a little bit of sewer work and signal work that still needs to be completed relative to the project. And the oversight for that will have to be factored in. So it's anticipated that that work will be around the $2 million mark. But again, until all of that's completed and then the invoices are all paid and those are reconciled, the true surplus may not be known. So it might not be quite what is shown on this graphic. But again, these are snapshots at a point in time for the end of the fiscal year. On the next slide is just the remaining list of projects and their concession fee, again, approved to date, and any potential shortfall or surplus amount. And then at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the two amounts that we say are either balance entry, as we call it, for the approved amount versus where we see that shortfall or surplus. And those two numbers, you'll see the $6.6 million or the 6.7. They're running very close together about what we see would be in that balance entry for the projects. So you see that we are moving very successfully along with these projects. On the next couple slides, I wanted to just highlight a few of the projects that have been underway to give you a flavor of some. I'm sure you're familiar with most of these. This is the Manassas Park parking garage that I think many of you attended the ribbon cutting just a few weeks ago for this. This wonderful facility is adding 540 new spaces for the VRE and visitors to the Park Central development area. And this really highlights the power of combining different funding sources to deliver, a multimodal project. On the next slide, we have the East Falls Church Metro Station Bus Bay project, and this is going to expand the bus parking area there by 3 bays. It's also going to make some improvements to bus shelters, improve the accessible parking areas, and provide upgrade for some pedestrian facilities. The construction started over the summer and is expected to be completed next year. And then the last project I'd like to highlight is the Route 29 widening project in Fairfax County. This is a roadway widening from 4 to 6 lanes for about 1.5 miles. Also be adding shared use path on both sides of the road. Construction started back in 2023. And is anticipated to complete next year. On the next slide, we have just a few stats to share with you this evening. We often get asked about how our express lanes are performing. So these are just a few stats from our partners at EMP who operate the 66 outside the Beltway express lanes. This is data that they provided to us from November 2024. You can see some of the stats there about how some of the trips on just the 66 facility are running there. Bus transit, number of HOV trips, which that all translates to taking vehicles and passengers off our general purpose lanes. Even you've heard us talk about moving even students back and forth on those lanes very effectively. They also provided us that traffic has rebounded since construction, 18% higher volumes they're seeing out on the 66 corridor, 23% increase in throughput along the corridor, 66 since the facility opened. And they have about 1.3 million trips every month in the express lanes. And about just under 80% of those drivers that use the express lanes on just the 66 corridor have only about an average of 1 to 3 trips per month. So when people say that these lanes are really priced out and they're only for a select number of users, no, they're really for people who want a reliable trip once in a while. So I think some of this data really supports that when we make those statements. And then my last slide is just totally off topic of 66.
Still very.
But we had to throw it in there to make sure no one you're paying attention, but we're very excited because in just about a week or so, we're going to be opening our next asset on our 94, soon to be 97 miles of managed lanes. The 495 Next project. We announced earlier this week that November 22nd is the day that the new lanes will open. So that's next Saturday. We've been working hard on that project, and we're very pleased to be providing congestion relief, transit improvements, pedestrian improvements. They're going to come online by the middle of next year, but they are coming online with that project. But we're very excited for our ribbon cutting and then the lanes to open next week in advance of the holiday season. And that is my presentation for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Authority members, do you have questions? Anyone have questions? Looking around, Mr. DeFerente.
I just do want to announce tonight that the Maryland side has figured it out, or just curious. I just wanted to see about data. Your slide had the number of express lane, a couple slides back had the express lane. Do you do vehicle volumes and speeds comparing the non-express and express lanes? Is that in a report that, is there more detail beyond this that we could look to see to sort of compare speeds and volumes as between the two sides?
So this data that I provided this evening is from our concessionaire express mobility partners. I do not believe that they have data that compares the speeds in the two lanes, but I can check on that and
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Bodie.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. Similar question, but slightly different is at some point we could see the trend on these these numbers over time. I would love to see that. So for Western Prince William County, a lot of the projects that are being funded by this have really helped improve throughput. And frankly, as being a PRTC commissioner as well, we recently, as you all know, opened those routes that go as far as Warrant and Front Royal. So that adds to this. So I would love to see how that ridership and how that utilization has increased over time, especially knowing that, again, on both ends, we've expanded service out farther west, but also all these improvements that have helped get folks to the commuter lots, to the 66 express lanes, I think has helped over time. I'd love to see that trend line over the last 4 or 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes,
Thank
sir. Good. How you doing?
Thank you,
Great.
Michelle. Wonderful to see you tonight. Thank you for being here. Just to go back to Mr. DeFerrante's comment, well, you might not have the data on the speed differentials. The managed lanes, this being what we believe the most sophisticated managed lanes network in the world here in Northern Virginia, but they are managed so that the speeds will be reliable. Can you speak a little bit to that reliability and how it benefits the users, including transit users?
Right, the managed lane network, we have federal requirements to maintain a certain speed in those lanes. Minimum 45, but it's also, it usually is higher than that. It's usually 55 or even, I mean, it's most of the time it's 65 or higher in our managed lane network across the corridors. So when that happens, it takes cars out of the general purpose lanes and allows those to operate at a higher level of service as well. That's the premise behind the managed lane network or system that we use across, whether it's 66, 95, 495, 395. That's the premise behind that. So,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Just wanted to clarify that. And while I have the mic on, I just want to thank Michelle and her team for the outstanding job that they've done all across our NOVA interstate network in developing these projects and delivering one, as you just mentioned, a really important one next Friday of next week. Thank you again so much for all that your team has done. And also a great example, someone mentioned Maryland. Maryland is watching. The presentation that you just provided with the list of projects that this body and others contributed to, that is exactly the kind of benefit that other similar projects that might be on the other side of the Potomac Ocean could benefit from considerably.
Potomac Ocean.
And so we just wanted to take a moment with that. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? All right, authority members, if you don't mind, I'd like to, without objection, take item number 8 right now, and then, because I need to leave, and I want to be here for that discussion. And then if I do have to leave, we'll go back up to item number 7, depending on how long the item number 8 discussion will take. Is the staff in the room, Mr. Beckman, for item number 8? Could they come to the table, please? Okay, let's take that item first, just in case I have to head out. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair Randall, members of the authority. My name is Starla Cuso. I am the Transportation Planning and Programming Manager here at MBTA. I am also the project manager of the regional approach to funding Northern Virginia's bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure initiative. Tonight, I'm joined by Kate Witness. She is our project manager on the consultant side with Kimley Horn. She briefed this group in October, and we are here again to highlight some of the key takeaways from this report. So tonight we are here to ask the authority to approve the transmittal of the report to the House and Senate Transportation Committee chairs. Again, as a reminder, this was a formal request from the committee chairs requesting that NVTA review the findings of VDOT's 2024 bicycle and pedestrian network study and make regional recommendations to fund the infrastructure identified as part of that study. So I won't get into the details because Kate's going to give us that, but I did want to note that both the Technical Advisory Committee and the Planning Coordination and Advisory Committee, PCAC, unanimously endorsed this report. So I'll turn it over to Kate.
All right, thank you, Starla. I promise this will be a very quick presentation because it's similar to what you all saw a month ago. So on the next slide, just to reiterate what the initiative of this effort was to look at existing funding sources and future funding strategies to implement the 4,000 miles of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that was identified in that 2024 VDOT study. So as part of our initiative, we approached by doing research and review of the existing funding sources, as well as future funding strategies that are currently being applied to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure here in Northern Virginia and could be applied to implement that infrastructure. We also consulted with the ongoing efforts in DMV Moves and SJ 28, and we also coordinated with a lot of regional coordination partners. So on the next slide, you can see that we invited over 60 different participants. Our regional coordination stakeholders were made up of VDOT staff, NVTA member jurisdictions, stakeholders, and advocates. They were invited to 2 different regional coordination meetings. The first one was here at the end of July. We had some really great discussions about challenges our localities currently face in implementing bike ped infrastructure, what's working well for them. And our second regional coordination meeting was at the end of August, where we presented our potential strategies that could be implemented. And the feedback we heard was integrated into the report that you all were given. On the next slide, this is our approach to funding. So we took 2 different avenues. The first was looking at existing funding sources, which is exactly that. What are the pots of money out right now from local, regional, state, or federal sources that could be and oftentimes are being applied to bike ped infrastructure here in our region? And future funding strategies. What are new strategies that could create revenue that currently isn't implemented here in Northern Virginia that could be used to fund bicycle and pedestrian projects? On the next slide, we wanted to acknowledge some of our regional, state, and federal funding sources that have been reliable and successful in funding bicycle and pedestrian projects over the years. These sources are used to fund larger projects as well as smaller projects that average anywhere between $10 and $1 million here. So we've been very successful with the funding sources that we have for implementing bike ped projects. We wanted to acknowledge that. On the next slide, you all were previously shown 45 different strategies. What we did was we qualitatively analyze those strategies against the 7 metrics that you see on the right side of the screen there. This allowed us to see a holistic picture of the different taxes and fees that we evaluated as part of this effort. Really want to emphasize that there was no financial modeling. This was all done at a qualitative level as part of this initiative. And then on the next slide, so following that funding strategy assessment, there were several strategies that consistently received what we consider high assessments across multiple of our metrics. When these results were combined with our stakeholder input, as well as some of the regional insight, our team identified a refined list of 14 high quality strategies. They're in no particular order there on the slide either. So further considerations would be to study these 14 strategies through financial modeling, as well as additional investigation into the legality, as well as the pathway to implementation for these projects. And then on the next slide, we briefly just wanted to touch upon that there were several revenue strategies that had high assessments on multiple criteria that shouldn't proceed for logistical reasons of implementing at a region-wide scale or their applicability to bicycle and pedestrian projects. So we just wanted to acknowledge that they show promise elsewhere, but not for this particular initiative. So with that, we are happy to answer any questions because I know that was quick.
So let me just say, authority members, if you look at the date on the request for this, it was March 17, 2025. This is an amazing, amazing report to be done in that time period. I mean, I just blown away with how complete this is and how quickly this was done, and what a high level this was done at. I mean, this was heavy lifting. So thank you very much, Ms. Backman, and all of your staff who were a part of this, and all the committee people who were part of this. I could do this a couple of different ways. I can make the initial motion, and then if someone wants to either make an alternate motion or do a friendly on the motion, we can have that discussion within the motion. That's probably the easiest way for me to do that, is put the motion on the table, and then we'll go from there. So I'll do it like that, and then we'll see where the motion ends up in the end. So I move the authority approve the transmittal of the report to the House Intended Transportation Committee chairs.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. I will give that second to Councilmember Snyder. So now let's have discussion on that motion. If you have discussion on the motion, please put your light on, or let me know, or raise your hand, or something. Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd also like to thank you all for the speedy and in-depth study that you put together. I know you didn't have a lot of time for it. One of the things that I think would be helpful, and I had a conversation with Senator Searville earlier today, he's very, very eager to see us take some action on bike and pedestrian improvements above and beyond what we've done right now. And he's hoping that we can have a pathway, pun intended, to finding a funding stream that would facilitate that. And so I would like to see us, Madam Chair, move that we continue this effort into the future, looking at a more nuanced feasibility or other strategy approach. And I assume that would take more funding from the Commonwealth in order to do that. And I would move that recommendation.
So then what you're doing, because I wouldn't take that as a friendly. So what you're doing is asking for an alternate motion. So you're making the motion and then you're doing I further move. Is that what you're trying to do right now?
Madam
Okay.
Chair, you're correct.
Okay, so then if I understand the motion we're going to discuss now is the motion on the table that the authority approve the transmission of the report to the House and Senate Transportation Committee and I further move to continue the effort by looking at funding streams. Is that what I heard you say?
So,
Just
Madam
wanna make
Chair,
sure I understand it.
we were, if you could go to the slide before that, where you just want to make sure that I state it correctly. So as I believe you said, and you can correct me, I think you said that the next step would be for us to more
Like conduct financial modeling
There.
to understand
Thank
what
you.
that revenue magnitude would be, as well as legality or pathway to implementation.
Thank you.
Okay, so that would be.
That would be what I would.
Okay, all right, so now at this moment, there is a new motion on the table, and now that motion needs a second.
Second to both of them together, yes. Or second.
Well, it's only one motion on the table now. It's an I further move to the motion, so you're seconding the motion that Ms. Boysko that Senator Boysko just made, yes? All right, so the motion on the table we're discussing now is what Senator Boysko made. As the maker of the motion, Senator Boysko will speak first.
Thank you. In order to inform the General Assembly of the direction that we could go to make a fiscally responsible recommendation, I think it's important that we understand, just as we did with the SJ28 study, to continue to look at this so that we can actually create a plan, a long-term plan for the advancement of bike and ped improvements through NVTA.
Okay, any other discussion on that, on the motion that Ms. Senator Boysko has on the table?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam.
Supervisor Bodie, I should recognize you for the record.
Thank you, Senator Boysko, for that amendment, because I know, I've talked to Senator Serval about this all the way back when he used to represent Prince William County. And obviously some of the difficulty there was that all the current funding schemes that we have out there really prioritize congestion mitigation and all these other things that frankly don't really help bike ped. So I really appreciate that thought there. I guess my question might be a question for Mr. Cutler or the folks that presented it. How much was looked at in terms of the low-hanging fruit of things like restriping current existing roads and things like that, where you may not need a lot of funding to do it, but you need that coordination with the locality and VDOT in order to do those types of things?
We did not look at that.
Appreciate that. So I'm not going to make a motion now, but I just wanted to offer that because at least in Prince William County, we have a lot of roads where we could end up having them connect to a much larger bike ped network. They're just not striped that way right now. And through traffic calming and other things that don't cost nearly as much as wide scale improvements or even construction, there are ways that we can expand that network. So I just wanted to say that and offer that piece.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Just so
You want to respond?
I did.
Yeah, go for it. Oh, sorry, I'm not the chair.
Okay, I'm actually not gonna let you go for it. Thank you, though. Delegate Sewell, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. I'm gonna go over here first because I actually don't want to get off on another discussion that's not really part of the motion on the table right now. So I'm gonna go over there to the delegates. But thank you, Delegate Sewell, very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to go in a slightly different direction. So just thinking about the initial letter that we received, I think that we have provided an more than adequate response. And I am very concerned about the potential for us to open up another component with a request for additional study without us going through the General Assembly. I have not had the chance to speak with Chair Delaney. I have not had the chance to speak with the Speaker. I have not had the chance to even correspond with the patron who initially brought this project forward. And I have great concerns that we're undermining the way that we communicate with the authority and could potentially find ourselves in a peculiar position as far as how we will move forward with requests from the General Assembly, not only with MBTA, but with a host of other partners, especially at a time in which there is no noted funding source for this next step in the study to even transpire.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this item before I speak on this item? Mr. Snyder.
You know, as I looked at this report, I thought the greatest additional contribution MBTA could make would be to explain in more detail that in fact bike ped projects are fundable under the 70% money. We know they're fundable under the 30%, but it seems to me, Senator Boysko, that a very rich area for further discussion with the localities and others putting projects forward is how can they craft a project that would comply with the NVTA statutory requirements. And I think NVTA is prepared to offer that and work with the jurisdictions. So CEO Backman, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a very fruitful area that maybe a more detailed look at existing revenue sources might prove to be a more valuable approach, because some of these new revenue sources are going to be really tough hoe to get.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. What we have noted previously, I think it was about 2 years ago, we did an inventory and it wasn't exhaustive, but an inventory of funding sources available for bike and pedestrian projects, transportation alternatives programs, CMAQ, the 70%, the 30%. Localities have general funds, smart scale. There are several funding sources available. One of the questions I'm always having to answer is, MBTA, as was told to me, you've only put 3.8% on bike ped projects. That 3.8% is $190 million, as we discussed last month. And additionally, that's dedicated bike ped projects. What happens is, we can only evaluate and the staff make a recommendation for funding for projects that are submitted. We are in a position where projects submitted to us are larger in scope, scale, cost, because there are other funding sources available to really meet the needs of bike pedestrian projects. But given that we have $190 million today, we have funded bike pedestrian projects, and they are funded under the same criteria against the same process as every other project. And these projects have done well, but we haven't received an overwhelming majority of applications, if you will, because you can get CMAQ and Transportation Alternatives Program. And, this year, Smart Scale, the average award was between $32 and $35 million. So again, when we look at factors like that, localities and agencies submit projects with larger scope and scale. And when we've had conversations with them, the other projects or projects that are outside that threshold, they can utilize other funding sources, including the 30%, but definitely the 70% as well.
You good, Mr. Snyder? Yeah, okay. Mr. McCabe? Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand, because I appreciate what Senator Boysko is asking us to do, but I'm not sure I understand it exactly. Because if the ask is that further analysis of these funding sources be done, I guess my question is NDTA the right entity to do that at this point? Or is not some other state agency the right entity to do that at this point? And so that concerns me a little bit. I'm all for looking at, you know, which one of these funding sources makes the most sense moving forward. I'm just concerned with if we're heading down a path of NVTA endorsing the ones that we think are most feasible, I think is when we're going to get into some challenges, because I know for Fairfax's standpoint, we have voluntarily pledged $180 million to bike and ped improvements over the last couple of years. And we figured out a way within our current revenues to be able to do that with money left over at the end of each quarter, a capital sinking fund, some internal mechanisms to be able to do that and to do it successfully. But I wouldn't be in a position, if another jurisdiction had a different idea, to endorse a different concept for doing that. And so I'm not sure it's entirely MBTA's role to identify the funding sources that we think among our very diverse jurisdictions would make the most sense. I do think there's gonna need to be further analysis to be done. And that point I absolutely agree with Senator Boysko on. I'm just not sure who the right entity would be to do that in a fair way, recognizing that each of us comes to the table representing very diverse jurisdictions and how we raise revenue. And I mean, I look at this list, I think the good thing about this list is it's very complete. The bad thing about this list is there's some on here that I think are just dead on arrival for the jurisdiction I represent. I mean, it's nice that they're on there, but they're DOA for me. That doesn't mean that Mayor Reed or you know, Mayor Davis Younger might say, hey, those aren't dead on arrival for us. We think those are great things. And I just don't want to put us in that precarious situation. So I want to understand a little bit more what this next step would be asking specifically of NVTA to do versus what the state should be doing in looking at this list and identifying specifically which ones that are statewide might be most pertinent.
So I would say, and I will go back to you for closing. I would say a couple of things. One, I'll go back to what the request was from Senator Surville, and I'm sorry, not from Senator Surville, but from the two Transportation Committee chairs. What the request was on the letter that was sent to us on March 17th has been complete. This report actually does exactly what he asked for, what they asked for, Mr. Laney and Mr. Bagby asked for. And so we've done that. If there's going to be another ask, it should go through the process correctly, in my opinion. It should need to go through the General Assembly and come back to us in a way that we can respond to it. There are, if I'm not mistaken, Senator Boysko and Delegate Sewell, there are 140 members of the General Assembly between the House and Senate. Is that right? I do not want any one member of the General Assembly to be able to task any regional organization to do something without it going through the process. And I think that there's a lot of things to consider. So all the things that Mr. McKay just said, but I don't know what I don't know to be able to feel comfortable voting on this. That doesn't mean that when, you know, if this goes back to the General Assembly and I have more details and I know what the cost is and I know what the scope is and I know what the ask is, I'll vote for this. But right now, this is just much too loose and I don't know what is being asked of us, nor do I even know who's asking it of us, to be quite honest. And so until I can get those things done, I can't do that. And the other thing is I am, and I hope all of us are, very protective of the staff. And to ask the staff to put out a product with no clear guidelines, no clear money clarification, none of that, is to ask a professional staff to put out a product that they don't know what they're really doing with it. And if something turns out to be incorrect in that, who do you think they're going to come back to? Right? And I won't let that happen to this staff. I wouldn't let that happen to staff in Loudoun County either. It is incumbent on us to some degree to protect the staff. And so I'd like to see it go to the General Assembly and come back to us and then have that discussion at that time. And I will likely be in support of it at that time, but in this way, there's just too many unknowns for me to support this your amended motion right now.
Madam
Would you like a closing?
Madam Chair, I will withdraw my motion. I think that I was not thinking of it through the lens that you have described, and I appreciate it. What I would like us to be able to do is to use this body of work so that we can then move our pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure forward. And perhaps that is taking it back to the General Assembly and asking the prospective patron to bring a bill that would provide the metrics that we need to do the research on and provide funding for that. But I appreciate the conversation and certainly appreciate the work that you all did. And you did exactly what you were asked of. I also, as we've had this conversation, I know that our charge is to reduce congestion and increase safety. And certainly appreciate that that's always the lens that we take when we are setting policy in here. So I will.
And I'm going to thank you. First of all, thank you. Thank you for those words and thank you for the collaborative way in which this has been handled. I'm going to assume the second of the motion is in compliance with the withdrawal of the motion. Okay. Then back on the table is the original motion that I made and that was seconded by Mr. Snyder. So now we're in discussion of the original motion. As the maker of the original motion, I will say again, I think this was an amazing work. I look forward to hearing what the chairs of the Transportation Committee and anybody else in the General Assembly concludes when they see this. Hopefully they will appreciate how much effort was put into this in a very short period of time. And when Ms. Baynard, Ms. Backman and I go down to the General Assembly once or twice or three times during the session, we will be able to answer the questions that they need to have answered at that time. So thank you very much. Any other discussion on the original motion? Mr. Snyder.
Just, I don't think it needs to be in the motion, but it's obvious that that NVTA is here and does very high quality work. And should additional work be asked of us, we will do it in a similar high quality fashion. Any follow-up?
Well, so that's not one that you're right, that wouldn't be part of a motion. And two, I wouldn't put that even on the record because I'm not going to commit us to do something before we know what we'd be asked to do. So just in general, and about anything, to be quite honest, just about anything. So, anything else? All right, I made the motion. Mr. Snyder seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passed unanimously. Let me run back up to the first item on the agenda of action item, which is the approval of the October 9th, 2025 minutes. I'm assuming everybody read those minutes, and I will put a motion on the table to approve those minutes.
Thank you.
Well, you can't say second. You were not here.
Robert rules, you can still.
You can't vote on it.
Someone else.
That's everybody. You said second by Senator Boyce-Coe, and you're going to abstain on this motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, we have two abstentions, Mr. DeFerente and Mr. Bodie will abstain on the motion. Mr. Snyder, are you good if I take my leave, sir? We have item number 6, item number 7, when 8 is finished, and now you're on your way?
Motion to not stand in the way of the chair seeing your sister.
Motion to what?
I won't stand in the way of you seeing your sister.
Listen, if you knew this particular sister.
I didn't ask that question.
Put it out the door.
Family.
I do appreciate all the kind words, though. Ms. Beckman, just a point point of inquiry, what our December meeting, is it a regular meeting? Are we having a party or what we doing?
I mean, if you want to have a party. we can
Just
But we have
regular-
a regularly.
Okay, all right,
regularly
just checking. Thank you. Here you go, Mr. Snyder. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. So we're on agenda item number 6 and the audited financial statements and compliance reports. There was a lot of information was available in links in the basic report that's in your packet. Finance committee has been deeply involved in this, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Longies.
Thank you, Vice Chair Snyder. I'd like to introduce Michael Garber, who is the partner with your audit firm. The audit firm actually works for the board very directly through the finance committee. We have some highlights, and being respectful for time, Mr. Garber and I have figured out some ways to make this faster, but still, as all finance reports are, very entertaining. Next slide, please. So focus on project perspectives. If you read your financial statements for your jurisdiction or anybody else, I suggest you go to the flip notes and go to the management discussion and analysis, because that really tells you what the jurisdiction is doing through those financial statements. In that, what we have focused on this year is the directive that the authority gave us for fiscal 25 to focus on project delivery. There's several notations in there in the management discussion and analysis, or MDA. Basically, it boils down to, we took what you told us to do, to focus on project delivery. We used the resources you provided to FTEs and actually made $109 million in project funding adjustments that resulted in $76.5 million being available for you to assign to projects in the next 2-year update to the 6-year program. Additionally, we understand the focus on BRT, and we note BRT's importance within the financial statements through a variety of mechanisms. I'm also happy to report that we took the next step of the BRT initiative and folded it into the transaction procurement, which is in process. But we are in the process of that procurement where we know the costs. So working with the finance and planning, working together, was actually able to fold the next BRT component into the transaction update with no additional cost to the county. We're still going to bring this project in on budget. Next slide, please. So we talk a lot about the use of funds. The authority's balance sheet basically is a little over $2 billion. That kind of matches the investment portfolio through project delivery. I'd also like to note that project reimbursements for 2025 were $196 million, up from 138 last year. That is 2 FTEs who are doing a lot of work in addition to their regular planning duties. I also would note that this money, and we try to play this up more and more now, especially as we are on the verge of the General Assembly assembling, the authority is funding a 17-year project funding pipeline. That is the level of responsibility that we have to make sure that the projects you've already approved, some of which are obviously in active construction or active stages of completion, that's a 17-year period. Revenues, next slide, please. I'm not going to say too much about revenues, although, as we have noted before, the authority stands well positioned to weather the storms that we are now currently going through. When we had that discussion a couple of months ago with the Finance Committee and the authority, we could see storm clouds. We're now, I think, in kind of the midst of the storm, but I want to emphasize the authority is well positioned to navigate through those. I will end up my component of this presentation drawing your attention to the 2 large sheets, in front of you. This again is our ongoing effort to make sure any reader of the financial statements understands that every dollar that is in the hands of the authority is already assigned to a project. The first report, which has a page number 74 on the lower right, which is that portion of the financial statements, shows you every project that has been funded by the authority. It shows the appropriated funds and the actual invoicing. If there's a zero in the remaining appropriation, that project is finished. You will see these are all SPAs, so you may see a project referenced several times here. It could be one part of one overall project that has multiple components. The last page of this report shows you projects that have been approved by the authority but do not have an appropriation yet. Essentially, the project sponsors have told us they're just not ready to start using the money. But again, this is part of that 17-year project funding pipeline we are now managing. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Garber.
Sure. You don't need to worry about the slides. I'm going to go off script. So I'll just very briefly, we did meet with the finance committee last month and went through the reports in detail, and all of the slides that Mr. Longy prepared, we did go through them with those. I don't think we have to do all of that this evening. But I would like to report that one, you have received the unmodified opinion on your financial statements. So that's the clean one. That's the one you're looking for. In the very back of the report, there's also a document on internal controls and compliance. That one also is also clean for your entity as well. So no findings there. The other items that I would have gone over in the slides, we had no audit entries when we did our work. We had no past adjustments. All of documents that we requested, inquiries we made with the finance team, everything that we needed to do our audits provided to us as near as we can tell, completely, totally, and certainly on time. So we appreciate that. I don't think we have done anything working with management or this group or this board that would have a problem with our independence or your independence in the other direction as well. So I think we can render this audit opinion and move forward with that. Lastly, I would just like to thank everyone that helped us, Peggy, the finance team. Greatly appreciated everything. Actually, two things I want to finish with. One, not every one of our clients drafts their financial statements. You all actually do draft your financial statements. And every year we get a little bit better and a little bit better. And I know that Peggy and her team do not like me finding anything in the report. And I can't help myself. I go this literally from front to back, every letter, every word. It was the cleanest that we've ever had. It was extremely well done this year. Not that the other years had lots of problems, but this was probably the best year we've had to date. So their team deserves some kudos for that. And lastly, to answer your question from about 45 minutes ago, yes, the HOV lanes do move much faster than the other lanes. And I can testify to that every time I come in.
Me too.
Yes. So with that, thank you. And I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions from Mr. Longy or Mr. Garber? Okay, not seeing any. There's a suggested motion. I would ask that someone make that motion.
Second.
And that motion is I move authority acceptance of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority's audited financial and compliance reports and the results of the audit for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks to the entire finance team. Now, we've got the strategic plan and that's up now. So, Ms. Sink.
Good evening, everybody. We are seeking adoption of our full 2025 strategic plan that is presented to you in your packet. Just as a reminder, it includes the elements of the vision, mission, core values, and the 4 strategic goals that you all adopted in May earlier this year. And it also includes the strategies that we discussed and presented last month at the authority meeting. So all elements of the plan have been coordinated and presented to the Regional Jurisdiction and Agency Coordination Committee, the Technical Advisory Committee, and the Planning Coordination Advisory Committee. And they were all in agreements and no comments and accepted it as is. And all of the elements are also in line with our legislative mandates. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you. Well, that was great. And I will say, I did look at the strategic plan and tried to find problems. I really couldn't find any. But, I would say that I want to make one point in goal one. I think it might be important to add lead the region's transportation initiative and borrow in collaboration with jurisdictions and agencies. I think the leadership and the collaboration both go hand in hand on that one. So if there's no objection, I would just add that, ask for you to add that language.
The definition language that we have in coordination,
It would be
collaboration.
Strategies, goal one, lead the region's transportation initiative. And then just pull up the language from the underneath that goal in collaboration with jurisdictions and agencies.
Okay.
Okay. Leadership and collaboration, two great things that we do here. Very well, thanks. Anybody have any questions or comments about the strategic plan? Okay, not seeing any. I'd entertain a motion as follows. I move authority adoption of the 2025 5-year strategic plan with one change in goal one.
Second.
Thank you. Is there a second? The motion. Jeff, did you make that motion?
I thought you made the motion.
No,
I'd be glad to make the motion. I move approval of the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. There a second? Yeah, thank you. Everybody, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you. A lot of great work. A lot of great work has gone into all these items that we've had so far. So thank you so much. Next item on the agenda will be, since we did agenda item number 8, we're now on agenda item number 9. CEO Backman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the city of Fairfax is requesting additional concessionaire funds. You saw the presentation from earlier this evening. There is a surplus available. They're requesting an additional amount of $4.6 million. And as stated, this body, you make a recommendation to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and this is for the George Snyder Trail project. This has been coordinated with VDOT, and we did discuss at the Regional Jurisdiction Agency Coordinating Committee, and there were no issues.
Thank you. I entertain a motion to approve the recommendation to allocate additional transfer form 66 outside the Beltway concession funds for the city of Fairfax. Mayor Reed, I suggest would make that motion.
Yes,
Is that right?
I would like to make that
She
motion.
makes that motion. Who gets to second it?
I'll second.
Yeah.
Second by- All right. Who wants to go?
Senator Boy Scout.
No. Senator Boy Scout. Boy Scout second. Okay, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Hearing none. That item passes unanimously. Thanks very, very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of authority meeting schedule for calendar year 2026. CEO Backman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we have done for the last, I suppose, 20-something years, we're proposing to continue to meet the second Thursday of each month at 7 p.m. with no meeting in August unless special circumstances require. I will note that your January meeting is also the annual organizational meeting. And the dates are in your packet, but we will mail to your aides and schedulers so that they can get on the calendar if approved.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions for CEO Backman?
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, just a comment, and I don't feel strongly about this, so don't attack the messenger. I would just say that since school schedules changed a few years ago, we have altered our board recess as well, and it now encompasses a lot of July and less of August. Out of respect to the staff that have kids in schools, we now know that the window for travel is really the month of July, no longer the month of August. So I just put that out there as something maybe to think about, maybe as we potentially build a calendar for the following year.
So tonight we're approving the schedule, but it can change. Is that?
Well, I'm okay with this 2026 as being announced early enough. I'm just saying in future years, when we go to build this, we might want to look at trying to have the July be potentially unless special circumstances require, and then maybe looking at a much later August meeting. I think the challenge with doing it now that this has been before us is I think you probably want to alter the September date based on that. But I'm just saying, I think we need to be mindful of the staff, the people who work behind the scenes. When we take we take a potential summer break, it is to allow, in part, people who have school children and young children to be able to partake in those things. And I just think we need to recognize that, think about that for future years.
Okay. But you're okay with the
For 26, yeah.
Great. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval of authority meeting schedule for calendar year 2026.
So moved.
Second, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That item passes unanimously. So we're moving now to discussion and information items. And some of these are important and worthy of presentation. So CEO Backman, I'll recognize you on the HB 1915 annual report.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all for a second month in a row. As you know, the HB 1915 bill from 2015 requires that each locality embraced by the authority reports to us annually on if any land use or transportation elements of their comprehensive plan are not in alignment with transaction. And we have developed a form for these jurisdictions to report these inconsistencies on an annual basis as required by the code. The code does not prescribe any action from us based on what is reported. All jurisdictions, we're happy to say, responded to our request this year for fiscal year 25 reporting. The city of Alexandria did note an inconsistency due to latest project design that is different than what is included in transaction. However, we are starting, as you know, the update to transaction early next year, and the scope change will be addressed in the plan during the update. No other jurisdictions reported any inconsistencies, and we have saved this information for record keeping.
Thank you very much. CEO Backman, do you have anything else to add?
I do not.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or comments on that item? Okay, not seeing any. Item number 12.
Good evening. I'm happy to present with you the annual report to the Joint Commission on the Transportation Authority. The full report is in your packet. You can find a regional summary in the front of the report, followed by specific jurisdiction information in the back. The report has been submitted to the Joint Commission on Transportation Accountability, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I love it.
Like
You get the idea. We're trying to move fast.
Chair, I asked staff to be brief, but I didn't.
Good, that was good.
I want to tell you, there's a huge body of work here. Just give us 2 or 3 highlights.
Yeah, overall, as of fiscal year 2025, $988 million had of 30% regional funding, 30% local funding has been utilized across the region, across 290 projects that the jurisdictions choose based on whatever they're seeing.
Yeah, thanks. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that report? Do we need to take action to accept it or transmit it or no? It's just on. Great. Good job. All right, next item on the agenda, Governance and Personnel Committee report. CEO Backman, do you have anything to report in place of Chair Randall?
Mr. Chair, I would just note, and I don't know if Ms. Boehner would like to come up. We just had a brief Governance and Personnel Committee meeting earlier this evening. We do have our draft legislative priorities, but we will be discussing that next month as well, and to try to get the authority's concurrence on our priorities. I will note the main issue, or not issue, but add, if you will, is for the transit monies that you heard earlier about from DMV Moves and SJ 28, but making sure that it's net new revenue. That is critical. We do not want to have any source of diversion.
Yeah, so that answers my question, whether we're including the DMV moves in SJ 28.
We are.
Funding, and we plan to do that by
Yes.
legislative program, but emphasize, look, this is net new.
Net new is the
Okay,
key.
great. Anybody have any questions for that report?
This,
Yes, Senator Boysko, and then.
Oh, thank you.
Very
Mr.
good.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to point out that when we were in the discussions on the SJ 28, I repeatedly clarified that it absolutely had to be new revenue. It could not be taken from NVTA or another existing source.
And thank you very much, Senator.
The only thought I have for those who go down repeatedly, at least as I think about advocacy on that revenue source, yes. I think it would help to give a little primer on the other regions of the state so that when you are talking with folks, it's not just the value that Northern Virginia brings in terms of the economic analysis that NVTC did, but also the context, because if it's not additive for the whole state, we're not going to be influencing our non-Northern Virginia delegation. And I would imagine you do that anyway, but I just think a little bit of that is worth a reminder for those of you who are doing repeated meetings down south.
That's great. Can we include that as sort of, background information on
Do
that
that.
particular item? And I think, I've often thought it would be really good, there are big numbers and a lot of people is on the numbers, but what does this mean in terms of number of teachers? The money that we send to the state equals how many teachers are provided to the rest of the state, or how many social workers, or how many police officers or firefighters, you know what I mean? And you bring it down to, yeah, these are numbers, but these numbers enable other parts of the of the Commonwealth to provide services that they couldn't otherwise provide. Yeah, I don't know, just a thought, but the thought that you, Vice Chair Differenti, the point that you want to make will be included sort of in our description and background information.
Let's talk Senator Lucas's.
And thank you, Senator Boy Scout. Net new, absolutely, thank you. Is there any further discussion on, you're not asking for approval of a legislative?
No, not this evening.
Program at this point, okay. Any further discussion on item number 13? Okay, item number 14. Mr. Longy, you're back again. Give us a quick summary of how we're doing in terms of our investments, and again, just a quick summary of how we're investing in a way that protects the long-term stream of funding that NVTA is responsible for.
The portfolio using a laddered maturity methodology is actually performing very well to the point where in a single month, the authority makes its operating budget for the year, excuse me, plus $2 million in 1 month. That kind of summarizes the portfolio report for you. For the revenue report, we are still seeing good revenue numbers. We won't see the impact of the federal shutdown and the layoffs or the early retirements for the next couple months. But again, like I have said previously, I think we have a lot of tools in the toolkit to navigate that for you. And finally, the operating budget, we're 15%. We've spent 15% of the budget, and we're, I think, 17% roughly through the fiscal year. So all three of those are in good standing.
Okay, great. Any questions for Mr. Long? I wondered if the other members of the finance team, because so much of the work was done on the audit and this, can other members of the finance team please put your hands up, because we owe you a lot. Put your hands up. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on item number 14, the Finance Committee report? Okay, not seeing any. Item number 15, CEO Backman, do you have a report there?
It's in the packet, Mr. Chair.
It's in the packet. All right. Any questions or comments on that one?
Definitely not.
Next one, the Technical Advisory Committee report.
That too was in the packet.
Oh, I like this. You guys are really showing me up here, so, yeah. CEO report, Ms. Backman.
While it's in the packet, I would like to note that we did, have the resolutions of support for the 6-year program update come in. That deadline was October 31st at 5 p.m. So now staff, we're in the process of doing some of the analysis on the applications. Just as a reminder, we received 26 applications requesting just shy of $1.3 billion. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but we don't have $1.3 billion. Mike and the finance team, they do a great job, but we don't have $1.3 billion. The other thing I would like to know is introduce Tara Dunyan. She's the new executive assistant. So Tara, raise your hand.
you there? Yeah.
So
To see you all.
you will be seeing correspondence from her. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions for CEO Backman? Okay, not seeing any. Next item on the agenda, Chair's comments. I really don't have any, but just a big thanks to the staff. And there's a discussion here, and for me, it's very important that they continue to remain receptive to all modes of transportation, and I believe we are. And we need to just keep making that point, and our actions would be consistent with that. So that's all I had. Does anybody have anything that they want to bring up in terms of other business? Okay, not seeing any. Then I'm going to say a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. In opposition, any abstentions? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a long drive back.
Leave. We're gonna go yard side.